Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan McGuire, Manager of Professional Development at ACCE, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar. Today we'll hear from Todd Murphy, President of the Jefferson Chamber in Metairie, Louisiana. Todd's presentation is for chamber leaders, CEOs, presidents, or executive directors hired within the last 2 years. The session will focus on how to do what's necessary to turn a chamber around or move it to the next level of relevance. Before I turn the program over to Todd, we do have a few housekeeping notes. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, we will have time for questions at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, please ask them using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question, and I will read the question to Todd after his presentation. If we run out of time and don't get to your question, or if you have a question that you would prefer to discuss with Todd individually offline, please feel free to contact him directly. His contact information will be included in the presentation on the last slide. And third, this webinar is being recorded, and it should be up on the ACCE website on the ACCE University page within the next day or so. I'll also post Todd's presentation slides along with the webinar recording. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Todd Murphy is a native of Metairie, Louisiana, and he's been president of the Jefferson Chamber for nearly 4 years. Since taking the lead of the Chamber, which represents businesses in the largest parish of the region, the Chamber has taken several notable public policy and legislative positions, has grown its membership and high investor revenue by more than 20%, and received a 4-star accreditation from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Additionally, the Chamber was honored with the Top Leader Award as Best Chamber in the state of Louisiana in the Large Chamber category by the Louisiana Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives in 2013 and 2015. In 2014, Todd received the Champion of Economic Development Award from the Jefferson Economic Development Commission. Todd is a graduate of the New Orleans Regional Leadership Institute and currently serves on the boards of GNO Incorporated and the Louisiana Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. Todd holds a bachelor's degree from Louisiana State University with minors in economics, management, and speech communication. He is also a 2006 graduate of the Graduate School of Banking at LSU. So Todd, thank you so much for being with us today, and take it away.
Thank you, Susan. I'm thrilled to be here today, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope I can give you some new ideas. Susan mentioned that I went to the Graduate School of Banking, so I am a recovered banker and have been at the Chamber for nearly 4 years on professional staff. And before that, I was involved in our Chamber for about 12 years as a volunteer, including volunteer chairman. And so I have a real passion for chambers and for the work we do. I tell people every day that I have the best gig in town because I just simply come to work every day and with the single mission of how do we make our community better. And so I'll try to share some ideas with you, and as Susan said at the end, we'll have time for some Q&A. So a little bit about the Jefferson Chamber and what we do. So our tagline is improving business and improving lives, and that speaks to improving the business climate, business policy, business environment. Improving lives speaks to quality of life initiatives, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those today. So we're a medium-sized chamber. We have an 8-person staff. I have myself plus 7 full-time people. I have a board of 55, which many of you might refer to as a zoo rather than a board. 51 of those are voting, and we have 4 non-voting members. I have 2 economic development members, one from a regional economic development group and one from our local economic development group, and 2 from government that sit in and give us input, but they don't have voting positions. You'll see our budget is about $1.1 million. I talked about the mission, and of course every day we connect people and business. And if you look there on that map, Jefferson Parish is, of course, the one that's outlined in red. We are the largest parish in a 10-parish region, which is called the Greater New Orleans region. So where were we 4 years ago when I came in? And we came in and really just said, wow, we've got a lot of work to do. We had a very small office. Most of our committees had to meet elsewhere, and I'll talk about some of our committees in a few minutes. Our board certainly couldn't meet at our office. Our computers were about 9 years old. We had a tech guy come in one day, and he said, I don't know what that is, but it's not a firewall. So thank God nobody hacks chambers of commerce, right? And we were in the hole. So about July, when I figured out where we were, we had an annualized debt of about $80,000. Really no systems, no processes, no ownership. And so we went to work and developed this whole concept throughout our staff about ownership. And what that means is that if you walk through the hall of my office, everyone is crystal clear who owns a responsibility. There's a huge commitment to teamwork, but at the end of the day, one person owns every single responsibility that we do. We had some really overbearing volunteers. I'm certain that a lot of people have that. What's out there. It's sometimes if your volunteers are on your board or running a committee for too long, it's not healthy for the organization, and it kind of becomes their club, so to speak, rather than your business organization. We had a real outdated brand and communications. Our website resembled one, and I use the term all the time, of a club and not really the voice of business. All of our branding was different shades of red, and so some people had pink business cards and others had maroon. So we went to work on that as well. We had little regional involvement, and so we were very active, but yet we were very parochial. And so how do we change that? So that's where we were 4 years ago. So where are we today, which has just been a great ride and a lot of fun. We have a new office, very spacious. We can hold all of our committee meetings here. We have increased our expenses because we've increased our payroll, our insurance, our rent. Yet today, we're showing, at the end of the year, we're showing a surplus and not a loss. We have systems for sustainability. And I think that that's really important because as employees come and go, and even us as CEOs come and go, you want to leave a legacy. You don't want to be there for 2 years or 3 years or 10 years or 20 years, and when you leave, everything falls apart. So we've gone to great lengths to set up systems, including all of our files that are electronic now, so that we can sustain for the long term. When we first came in, and look, let me just tell you, take advantage of your honeymoon. When we first came in and we knew that we needed new computers, we had a phone system that hardly worked. And just 4 years ago, we didn't have caller ID, if you can imagine that. So I went to our executive committee and said, look, we really need an upgrade. We had some money in reserves, and so we were able to really kind of jumpstart from a technology standpoint. I mentioned ownership. I mean, to a T, we talk about this all the time. I mean, who owns it? And so we have that today, and everybody here can tell you who owns it. Everything is documented. If someone leaves tomorrow, I don't have any problem with a new employee jumping in and taking over. So we have volunteer-driven, yet staff-facilitated. I do not encourage anyone to have staff representation that's on a committee that's someone just taking notes. That staff member needs to be facilitating so that you're keeping things in line with your mission. And believe me, you want the volunteers. I mean, that's what will build your organization in the long term. We've built a pretty powerful and memorable brand, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in some communications as we go through this. We've revamped our website. We've actually revamped our website completely twice since I've been here, and we've done 4 total upgrades. So today our website is very user-friendly. It's mobile. If you're still having to stretch your website on your iPhone or your iPad, you need to look at upgrading that, because about 45% of the users in this country are accessing the web through mobile devices. So that's very, very important. We have some really great marketing collateral. I don't go in front of CEOs and ask them to become a part of our chamber and invest in our chamber and give them some kind of piece of material that came off the copy machine that's crooked. So we've really upped our game in that area. And then we went from little regional involvement, and I mentioned that a minute ago, to a regional leader. And we did that by getting involved and bringing all the chambers to our office and meeting with the CEOs every other month. We're very engaged in public policy, and I'll talk about that some more as we go through. But in many, many cases, when it comes to public policy and advocacy, we are seen as one of the leaders in the region. So how do we get there? So this is what you called in for, and I'll tell you that the first day, well, not the first day, I guess the first couple weeks that I was here on the job, I called a couple of my colleagues around the state and I said, "My gosh, where do I start?" And the first thing that I did from the information that I got from some of my colleagues was I went through the steps of the U.S. accreditation, and I can't say enough about that, which we're going to talk about here just in the next slide. We implemented some strategic planning. We increased our membership and our partnerships. We had a lot of dead weight on the rolls that, for whatever reason, weren't dropped, weren't paying dues. So we scrubbed our list and we increased our membership of our businesses, and we drilled down to discover what makes us relevant, and that is another key component. And finally, we became a business and community resource. Okay, so let's talk about the first step, U.S. Chamber Accreditation. So we are a 4-star accredited chamber, and you can find this information on the U.S. Chamber's website. We are a member of the U.S. Chamber. So for those of you who are not, it does not mean that we are a branch of the U.S. Chamber. We're simply a dues-paying member. We agree with them on public policy about 80% of the time, and the other times we let them know it. So, but in accreditation world, you can have a standard accreditation, a 3-star, a 4-star, or a 5-star. We are currently 4-star accredited, and this puts us in the top 3% of all chambers in the nation, and that are accredited. 150 out of 7,000 are 4-star accredited. So what does this take? What does it take to be accredited? Well, the accreditation process goes through 9 different categories. And by the way, it took us about 9 months to get through these 9 different categories. And so these are the categories that you see in front of you. Governance. So you really drill down to, what do your articles of incorporation look like? What do your bylaws look like? And believe me, guys, I am not considered a rule follower, but I can't tell you how important it is to read your bylaws and make sure that your bylaws are strong bylaws regardless of who's on your board, because if not, you can literally have your organization hijacked. So looking at governance and updating those documents is very, very important. And I won't go into detail on all of these. They're pretty self-explanatory, but finance, for example, do you have sound financial procedures? Have you been audited in the last 3 years? Well, I didn't know the answers to those questions. And when you go through this accreditation process, it forces you to drill down and answer those questions. And if you don't have sound financial processes, you have to put them together and submit them. And then you have to follow them, of course. If you haven't been audited, you have to do that. So these are just some of the things that they look at. Government affairs, are you really the voice of business, and what are you doing? How much of your budget is allocated for that? Technology, are you working on off of 9-year-old computers, and do you still have, file cabinets everywhere? When we moved into our new office, we left behind 13 file cabinets out of 15. So upgrading your technology is important, communications, facilities, and benchmarking, which is comparing against other chambers. That's really what that whole accreditation process takes. Now, why? Why should somebody go through it? Well, I think it puts you really on to a real strong path to success for a couple of reasons. One, it gives you a benchmark. It serves as an audit to where you are as a chamber. And this is something that is very, very important in that first 90 days. You need to be able to go back to your executive committee or to your board, depending on the size, and say, hey, here's where we are and here's where we've got to go. But finding where you are is really important. So it outlines your objectives. It's going to help you accentuate what are your strengths. Look, we found out that we were doing some things very, very well. The voice of business, the government advocacy piece, that was something that we were doing very well. Not regionally, unfortunately, but within our parish. And let me just stop there for a second. I've mentioned parish a couple times. Parish is the same as your counties. So I know we've got people tuned in today from all over the country, so parish and county is interchangeable. And it makes you proficient in those 9 broad categories of performance. And let me tell you, from a credibility standpoint, when I go in and talk to CEOs of companies and I talk about this 4-star accreditation, everyone can relate to that because there's accreditation processes in almost every professional industry that's out there. So really gives you a lot of credibility. So what do you expect? I mean, what takes place? Well, I mentioned it can take up to 9 months. It took us 9 months. I had a full-time intern who was a college graduate working on this for us. She came in once a week, and then all of the staff had individual homework projects in between, and I set up some ad hoc committees with our board to look at. I had a finance committee, I had an HR committee, so they were looking at all these different policies we had. At an insurance committee, I found out that we had insurance for events as long as the events were held on our office premises, which out of 6 major events is exactly 0. So we were grossly underinsured in the event category and as well as our liability insurance. So we set up those ad hoc committees. It does cost you some money. Just an audit for $1 million operation at the time, we were about $850,000. That audit I think was about $12,000. So it does take some financial investment to really go through this process right. You do have to make some changes to your internal processes and procedures. That goes without saying, and all of you, I'm sure, are going through that right now as a new CEO. Staff realignments or changes. I mean, one of the things that I kept reflecting back to, some things that I was learning in leadership training is you've got to have the right people in the right positions, and if you don't, you've got to have the courage to make that change. And I know that's hard because you've got people that have been on staff for many, many years, but if they're not willing to change, they're not willing to embrace, and they're not willing to be progressive, sometimes you have to make changes. Sometimes it's just a matter of realigning and building out those job descriptions. Be prepared for resistance. I mean, I heard for the first year how it was done before. My predecessor's name was mentioned almost on a daily basis, and so just be prepared for that. That's all part of the process. So we got our accreditation, we got our credibility, and Susan mentioned that in 2013 and 2015 we were named Large Chamber of the Year by our state association out of 48 chambers. So really something that we're very, very proud of. But part of what we've done as a staff to be able to accomplish this is we've looked at our chamber, and so we kind of got this on track in 2012 and the beginning of 2013, and we got to be really a pretty good chamber. Now we're focusing on how do we move this chamber from good to great, and that is a great read, by the way. It's a book called Good to Great, and I highly recommend that you pick it up. It's not just an author who's writing about how do you make your company better. It's a study, a case study of about 16 different companies that he compares. For example, Eckerd's and Walgreens, at one time they were both really good companies, and how did one of them become great and one of them dropped down to average and ultimately was bought out by Walgreens? And so there's some real tactics that you can use to instill within your organization to really move your organization. Once you get to that point that it's good, well then good's not good enough. Good is the enemy of great. So anyway, that's a good read. The other philosophy that we have, and I'll just sidetrack here for a minute in our office, is everything that we do, every event we do, every tour to our state capitol, every breakfast, every networking event, every golf tournament, and in our world, every crawfish boil, everything that we do, we strive to raise the bar. And we have that philosophy here in my office. And if you go into our team meeting room that we have right down the hall, I have a weightlifting bar hanging up on the wall. And that's a reminder to the entire staff that every time we're in there that we are working to raise the bar every day on everything that we do. So whatever your culture might be, I will tell you that instilling that team culture in your staff is just paramount to your success. So implement strategic planning. This is the second step. So why is strategic planning vital to a turnaround? Well, it's very easy as a CEO for you and I to come in and say, okay, here's what we think we ought to do. But if you have strategic planning, what's happening is you're bringing your entire board together and you're getting buy-in, okay? You're also getting accountability. Accountability from your board, accountability from your staff, accountability from you as the CEO. And by the way, include your staff in those strategic planning sessions. Don't shut them out of that. Nobody understands the inner workings of the chamber, the workload of the chamber better than your staff does. So you get buy-in, you get accountability. Really helps you act as a business. What business do you know that doesn't have a 3-year strategic plan? Again, this was one of the questions in the accreditation process. Do you have a 3-year strategic plan? If so, can we see it? Well, we didn't, so we had to go get one. And it also pushes you to be the best that you can be. Now, I didn't go in and say, okay, I'm going to have a strategic planning retreat, and I'm going to pull my board in, and I'm going to facilitate it, and I'm going to tell them how I want to do things. No, I didn't do that. What I did is I hired a professional facilitator. And myself and my chair, and I believe my outgoing chair, met with this person. And we used one person for the first 2 years. Then we switched to another person for the second 2 years. We do this annually to update and kind of take a scorecard of, hey, where are we? We outline our objectives. We make sure everything we're doing is measurable. And it really gets the board engaged. It gets the board on board. And what I'll tell you is that in that first year, the first year and a half, as I was making changes and I was changing programs and changing committees, anytime someone said, hey, Todd, we always did it this way, and maybe you're moving too fast, when you have a strategic plan in place, you say, hey, guys, this isn't Todd's plan. This is a board initiative. This is the board strategic plan. And so you need to help me and embrace that. Now, along the way, as you're taking action, you do have some people that you will lose on your board because they're not in charge anymore. They don't feel like you're, small business enough or big business enough or whatever it is. But if you're doing the strategic planning, then you've really got the will of your board. I would tell you to make sure you embrace modern technology. I'm 50 years old, and so I'm not a millennial by any sense in terms of technology, but I know what technology can do for you. And I know that, things like online banking and check scanners and all these types of things that we've brought into our office can make your office a heck of a lot more efficient. Refresh your perception, run it like a business. You want people to walk in and see a dungy little office, or you want them to see, fresh paint on the walls and a lot of smiles. Make worthwhile investments goes without saying. Again, the whole idea is to run this chamber, get rid of that word, not nonprofit. As I told my board the first year I was here, I said, you guys are taking this word nonprofit way too seriously. We need to run this like a business. So these worthwhile investments that I just touched on, let's talk about some of those. Branding and identity. So you'll see on the right what our old logo looked like. And then if you look right down, you'll see the new logo and the new branding. We have redone all of our communications pieces. I mentioned our website, but we've updated our office space. Hiring the right team, I can't talk enough about that. And not just hiring the right team, but really maintaining the right team. We have partnered with ACCE, and we take advantage of their benefits through their chamber benefits group. So we have a short-term and a long-term disability policy. We have a 401k. Then we have health insurance here locally, and we pay 80% of that for the employees. So I'm able to retain employees and compete with other small businesses that simply can't offer those things. We can do that 401k through the ACCE because that's in a pool of money through Principal Financial with 350 other chambers of commerce. But hiring the right team is important. Equipment, the security, how your office is set up, all of your programs, outsourcing. I can't stress how important that is. When I got here, we had a full-time accountant. Now, what is it at the time, an $850,000 Chamber of Commerce need a full-time accountant. So we outsource a lot of our financials now. I have a small accounting firm that does a lot of that for us. We outsource our payroll. I would get payroll reports back on a regular basis that the taxes were overpaid or underpaid. And so guess what? Then we're paying penalties. And then I had somebody tied up trying to do this on a regular basis. So outsourcing is very important, and you'll see Chamber Master there. We use that as our database management program as well. So all of these things you see on the screen we think are worthwhile. Obviously, it takes money. You can't just walk in and figure out, okay, I got to go spend all this money. I was in kind of a unique position because I did have some money in reserves. We had about 3 months in reserves. Today, almost 4 years later, we're right at 6 months in reserve. So that's important too, in case something catastrophic happens and your membership drops down, like a hurricane, God forbid, or something along those lines. So let's talk about membership a little bit. Obviously, you've got to increase membership. So, we came in and analyzed what we had. We were charging too little. And so while we increased some dues, we also looked at, who's out there that we had on the books that wasn't paying. And unfortunately, we were carrying some guys kind of way too long on that. So we looked at ways, how can we grow the membership? Are there some other ways for partnerships? Are there ways to, better engage with our members? And so we looked at quality over quantity. So what exactly does that mean? It does not necessarily mean number of employees per company, and that's not really what I'm talking about. But you will find that there, I'll just tell you that about 65% of our members have 10 or less employees. In that category, there are some of those companies that will try to utilize more of my time and more of my staff's time than does a company that has 500 employees. And so I think you really have to be careful about who your members are and where you're spending your recruiting dollars and your recruiting time. So we look very hard at that, and we look at categories too. We have not been very successful with architects and engineers, and we know that. We have not been very successful with retail. But we are with accounting firms and business services and, banks and credit unions and so on and so forth. So are your members or target members qualified within certain criteria? So I use that kind of 2+ years. If you're going after, and this is what was being done when I got here, they were going after all the startups. So every time a company came in and signed up for a new occupational license, well, that was a lead. Well, the problem with that is that company has 1 or maybe 2 employees. They're in a startup. They can't leave the office, so they want you to be their ribbon cutting outfit, their PR firm, their marketing firm, and whatever they're selling, whether it's tablets or pens or copy paper, they want the chamber to buy it. And at the end of the year, they tell you, well, it just wasn't enough value for me, and you've spent hours and hours and hours on them. So I would really analyze your membership. So retention, of course, is the most important. I think right now we're running about an 89% retention, up from about 71% in 2012, if that. And I think I'm being nice when I say that. So, we've looked at, all sorts of ways to not only bring in new members, but also to retain them. Consider implementing a membership campaign. So I mentioned I had a lot of members that weren't paying dues, and I had just really not enough members to sustain the office we had and the staff we had. So we did a membership campaign, and I didn't get too hokey with it, but we did bring in some professionals to help us kind of get a shot in the arm, and we picked up about 260 members over about a 6-week period. It does create a buzz. I mean, there were a lot of shirts and people wearing things around town, a lot of emails, oh, there's a new day at the chamber. It obviously rallies your volunteers. It brings a lot of people back to your organization that might have drifted off. And it does boost your membership, does give you a shot in the arm with your financials. And in our case, when we did it, we really needed the money, and we got some momentum. So But I do think if you're going to do that, you need to have a plan in to retain those people, because a lot of those people are joining during those campaigns just because someone is saying, hey, give me a check for $400 and come join our chamber. So offering customized programs and packages. So we've done a lot of different packages, and I'm going to show you in a minute some of the packages that we have for our high investors. But you know, creating these relationships, utilizing trade. I mean, I have a radio station here, an umbrella company, I guess if you will. They own 6 different radio stations, and they are so generous to us in running promotional spots. And in exchange for that, we give them sponsorships, we give them tickets to events. You know, we partner with a TV station where it's their logo and our logo talking about how great Louisiana is. Again, just great partnerships. So we have, these are our investment programs that we started. When I first got here, we just had dues and then we had sponsorships. And so what we did is we said, how do we package some things together so that we can get the big companies to buy in and help us with our balance sheet a little bit, and we can do more, we can plan better, and so can they. So we came up with these categories. So the number one investor level we have is a legacy investor. That's a $25,000 level that includes the company's dues, which are about $3,500, includes a spot in our tuition-based leadership program, which is about $1,500, and then includes a package that we put together of sponsorships throughout the year. So they might want to participate in the golf tournament. They might want to be in our Washington, D.C. fly-in. Whatever it is, we put a package together that gives them the additional value. And, of course, that's a very profitable level for us. The champion investor, same concept, but it's a $15,000 level. And then we drop down to $10,000, $7,500, and at the supporter level, $5,000. The bottom 3 levels do not include positions on our board or in our leadership program, but still very valuable. And since we started this in 2013, so we're in our 3rd year, we have not had one company drop out of our major investor program. It's a phenomenal way to really build high investment and to really know how to budget and sustain that going in year to year. These are some of our legacy investors. You might recognize some of these logos, and you might not. Some of them are regional companies. These are our champion investors. And you know, you'll see some in here that are trade. For example, the BC, that's a Busan Creative. That's an ad agency that does all of our marketing pieces. And we value those pieces at about a $15,000 trade per year. And then you'll see the other ones. And so on all of our marketing materials, you'll see these logos. So these are some of the incentives with member and investor benefits that you can use to drive retention. You know, we have a lot of events, as many of you do, social events, networking events, political events. We do a lot of marketing and communications, but these are all things that our members take advantage of because they want their logo connected with us. They want their brand connected with us. And so they want to sponsor these events. They want to be part of our DC fly-in, or maybe they want to be part of our political action committee. So we try to create involvement and opportunities for all members, regardless of the size, regardless of how old their company is, regardless of how old their employees are, their experience, so on and so forth. And as we say when we talk to them about their memberships, I mean, we really kind of take the Piccadilly approach. There's somebody here for everybody, something for everybody. So these are our committees, and you know, as I mentioned before, I think being volunteer-driven is really key. Now, we have a staff liaison on each one of these. Okay, and I mentioned that earlier, that word liaison. Our team really works as a facilitator on each one of these committees, and obviously we have a couple people that double up on their roles. But we have ambassadors, you know, our welcoming committee. Our education committee here works on K through 12 initiatives and also workforce development. We have governmental affairs, and we're very active in that group. That's probably our most passionate group of volunteers. We have 35 people in that committee that look at state, local legislation pieces, and occasionally some federal government pieces relevant to our area, like flood insurance and coastal restoration and those sort of things, and so on and so forth. I won't read through each one of them, but those are our committees. Discover your relevancy, and I don't know that there's anything more important than understanding what makes you tick and what makes you relevant to your committee. And there were so many things that we were doing 4 years ago that just quite simply did not fit with our mission. And so we had to scrub some of those things. We had to say, you know what is it that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing? What's going to give us the most out of our efforts? And are we communicating that to the membership? Do they understand what that means and what it is that gives them value? And so these are just some of the things that you can look at in finding your relevancy. Everybody talks about networking, and every time you do a survey to your members, the number one reason people will tell you that they join the chamber and what they want to get out of it is networking. And that sounds great, but only about 20%, maybe 25% of your members are taking advantage of your business and breakfast or your business card exchange or your wine and cheese or whatever you might call it. So they all talk about networking, but they're not all taking advantage of it. Educational opportunities and seminars, we do those on a monthly basis, and we bring professionals in to talk about everything from HR to social media to how to leverage capital and grow your business. Quality of life initiatives is very important, and maybe that's your relevancy. Maybe it's your leadership program. There's a couple chambers in some smaller parishes in our region that they do a festival every year, and that's just what they do. For us, it's the voice of business. It's the advocacy piece. We feel like that's what makes us relevant to our members. That's how I'm able to get all those big logos that you saw a few minutes ago. That's what makes us relevant. But I think you have to find that, and you can find that through your strategic planning of just exactly what your board thinks brings you to relevancy. Prosper Jefferson is our educational seminars. Okay, so let's talk about funding, because this talks to relevancy as well. So obviously in a chamber, we're funded by dues and we're funded by events, and as I mentioned, crawfish boil that we have every year. Relevance raises money. Whatever it is that you find to be the relevant piece of your chamber, okay, that is what is going to raise the money. Again, for us, it's advocacy. In your area, it might be a festival. It might be the networking. It might be the Prosper Jefferson Educational Series. Whatever that is, that will help you raise money, because the businesses in your community will respond to that. Okay, so relevancy. There's always room for improvement, right? Don't be afraid to reinvent stale events. When we first got here, we had an event called the Jubilee. It was a combination of an annual meeting and a gala and a silent auction, and there was alcohol and there was a sit-down dinner. This thing went on all night long. And when it was all done, a band played. Well, it was stale. People were buying tables and not going. So we blew that up. Now we have an annual meeting with passing of the gavel and a lunchtime session in January, and we do the big gala party in March. 2 different events, and we increase the revenue of that one event by moving it to 2 events by about $100,000. So actually this year, $120,000. So don't be afraid to reinvent stale events. It doesn't always have to be the same way it's always been done. Look at the time that you're putting in on events, and if they're not profitable, if it's not supporting your mission, if people aren't coming to them, if you're not getting a good response out of them, can them. We had some terrible networking after hours events when I got here. So we stopped doing them monthly. We did them every other month. I said, let's get them to be good events, and then if we can get them good, then we'll take them back to monthly. But let's not just keep doing something just for the sake of doing it. And that's just a shot of our gala that we had last month. So let's talk a little bit about communication, and I want to kind of run through these so I can leave some time for some questions and answer here. Develop a written communications plan. We have one so that when I get a new chairman every year, he doesn't come in or she doesn't come in and say, okay, I want this to go out weekly, or I want this to go out monthly, or I want this to go out daily. No, we have a written communication plan. This is what we follow. I'll take yours into advisement, but, this is what we're doing day in and day out. I believe in electronic. There's nothing more powerful than social media and your website and your emails. But, keep in mind, most of you, your CEOs, have a lot of gray hair, and they're still looking at the mail that's coming across their desk, and they're probably getting 150 emails a day. So an old school newsletter or postcard, save the date, is very powerful. And, of course, I mentioned media relationships. Chamber 101, we do those monthly. We bring our members in over a lunch, our new members, and we talk to them about all the different ways they can get engaged in the Chamber and all the different services that we have. And these are some of the pieces that we've done in terms of communication pieces. The Vision and Voice is our bi-monthly newsletter. So become a business and community resource. I can't emphasize enough. Represent your county or your city on a parochial basis, but work regionally. Streamline your programs. Advocate for business. I mean, that is what is going to build your membership and build your revenue, and build your ultimately build your leadership within your community. And you'll see here that we've got 3 different organizations kind of under one umbrella. We've got our Jefferson Chamber, of course, and we've got a 501c3 foundation. We've got a political action committee, and we've got our leadership program. But all of those things, really speak to becoming a community resource for quality of life initiatives, for electing the right candidates, and for building leadership. A little bit about regionally, I've kind of touched on a lot of this about working with other chambers, working with economic development groups. We host a regional roundtable in our office every other month with chamber execs, and I bring in the regional economic development group to lead the discussion. We weren't invited to the meetings before, so I said, well, how about if we host the meetings and invite them? And so we kind of turned it around, and I would tell you, don't wait to be invited. Be the leader. So organizational alignment, I touched on this a little bit. We've got 3 different organizations, 3 different boards, 3 different tax ID numbers, all run by this 8-person office. All 3 of these organizations have the same mission. It's improving business and improving lives. Just for tax purposes, they've got to be separate. And for fundraising purposes, that's a real advantage for you. But 3 different boards, same mission, and it took a lot of work on the bylaws, and I spent 2.5 years getting that political action committee aligned with our chamber, because as I mentioned earlier, the bylaws weren't right, and that group got hijacked and kind of became its own club. It's now back following the same mission, and there's a lot of the same overlap, at least the majority of people, with the chamber itself. Very, very important. And I'll just hit on a couple things here, show you that what our foundation does. Of course, it's a 501c3. We have really ugly canals here. We're below sea level, and so we have these drainage canals, and our foundation raised some money and decided we'd put some Las Vegas-style fountains and landscaping into the canal banks, and kind of the talk of the town. We did this last year. It's kind of neat. Our leadership program is under our foundation. That helps us raise money from companies that have maybe a pool of money in charitable giving, or go after foundation money that we can get to put into our foundation that's fully tax deductible. And again, all this speaks to finding your relevance. Political Action Committee, it endorses and financially supports pro-business candidates. And we put mail pieces out. We put ads in the local daily newspaper. This year we ran a $20,000 radio campaign driving people to our PAC's website, jeffersonchamberpac.org, simply because there were so many candidates. So that helped us get the candidates elected, and it also helped us brand our chamber and our political action committee. So here's a summary. Follow the steps for accreditation. I think that's really important. Implement strategic planning. That's your buy-in, guys. You've got to have a strong strategic plan to get buy-in from your board, and that way, when you as the CEO are making changes, it's not the Todd way. No, this is a board plan. This is a board initiative. You've got to increase your membership and really jumpstart that. And don't be afraid to partner with other organizations that, especially ones that can help you with resources and research and funding. Discovering that relevancy, I think, is absolutely key. And without that relevancy, you're going to have a really hard time building your investor base. And then, of course, becoming a business and community resource, which we certainly have. One final thing I want to just pose to you and let you think about. What do you think is the number one problem for chambers? Of course, this is Todd Murphy opinion here. The number one problem for chambers, and people will say, well, it's membership. I need more money. I need more programs. I need more this. I need more that. Here's what I think it is. I think it's board of directors that are afraid to act. They're afraid to jump out there because they don't want to offend somebody, so we can't take a position. Or they're afraid to spend money on computers because that might cost too much. Or they're afraid to do an audit because God knows what we might find and it might cost too much. And so I think it's our job as the presidents and CEOs of these chambers to challenge those board members to run these chambers like a business and not be afraid, but instead to really be the leader. All right, I'll stop talking and I'll take a minute to answer some questions, and then in a minute I'll put up another slide with all my contact information so you guys can contact me individually if you prefer. Susan?
Okay, well, thank you, Todd. That was great. If you all have questions and you haven't already typed them in, please feel free. You can type them in again to the lower right-hand corner of your webinar panel in the question box, and I'll read them off. So I'll just start going down the line then. A follow-up to the membership part of your presentation. Do you require members to be in business for 2 years?
No. No, we don't require. We take them. I think what I was referring to is that we don't actively go solicit startup businesses. We've just found that from a retention standpoint, they're much too hard to retain. No matter what we do, we just can't seem to find the right niche in servicing those startup businesses. But if they come to us and want to join, we certainly sign them up and we engage them and put them into our retention plan like we would any other business.
Okay. And who did you bring in to help you with your membership campaign?
It was called Membership 180, and it was Jay Handler and Annette Medlin. And since that time, Annette has left. She's now running the Corpus Christi Chamber of Commerce. They did a great job, but they're not together anymore, so I can't really speak for that firm now. Okay.
Yeah, both Jay and certainly Annette have spoken at ACCE conferences before.
Both very talented people.
Yeah, very, very talented. Todd, how many members do you have in your chamber?
We're right at 950 members now.
Okay. You talked a little bit about the investor levels. Are these investor level programs part of a tiered due structure?
Well, they're not. We're actually looking at tiered dues. We currently charge by number of employees. And so in the major investors, those are obviously, on the larger scale. And if you look at our system where I have a legacy investor, for example, the $25,000 level, it includes dues, it includes sponsorships, branding, a spot in the leadership program, a spot on the board. That's pretty much a tier. So I would say we kind of have a hybrid, but most of our, probably 80% of our membership is just paying dues based on the number of employees they have. We're looking at moving that to a tier in the not too distant future.
Okay. Our board members, go ahead.
I should say we're exploring that. I'm sorry.
Are board members only from the top 2 tiers of these program levels?
No, not at all. We have board members that represent solo practitioners to people that work out of their home. We have people from small banks. So no, not at all. It's just that those people, if if they so choose to have a position on the board, and not all of them do. I actually have one member that says, I give you $25,000 a year so I don't have to come to your meetings. You know, God bless him. But if they choose to have a board member, we will give them a board spot at the top 2 levels. But no, we're a very diverse board.
Okay. This is a question from someone who is running a regional chamber of 7 cities. Asking you, do you have competition through individual associations and alliances in various cities?
Absolutely. We have, this is a 10-parish region. I have 9 chambers of commerce in this region. We have a regional economic development group called GNO Inc. I have a sister organization that receives government funding called the Jefferson Economic Development Commission. So we do economic development in terms of creating the business climate, the business environment, good education system, workforce development. They work on site development. So all of those chambers, those 2 economic development groups, and then there's about 4 business councils, and then a lot of small area, there's a Metairie Road Business Association, there's an East Jefferson Business Association. So we have a lot of those smaller organizations too. So yes, there is a lot of competition, and I think that's, again, the reason that you really need to find your relevancy and really need to be the leader, not just in your own area, but in your region.
Okay. Do you lead any effective workforce initiatives for your community or region? And if so, can you give us a little information on that?
Well, we've been involved in a statewide level for workforce development. Locally, I will tell you, we've done some work with some of the plants here, but it's been very limited, and I'm sad to say probably the biggest project we did was for a Northrop Grumman plant that was closing, and we actually received a state grant to help keep some of those workers. They were going to lay off about 3,000 workers, and so what we did is we got a state grant to hire 2 people, one that would work with the employees and one with the employers, to try to match them up to keep that workforce here in our region. And that money, the only way we were able to do that was through our 501c3 foundation. The state was not going to do that through the chamber, but did agree to do it through our foundation.
Okay, there's a couple questions about your PAC. One is, do you alienate any members by endorsing specific local candidates?
I'm sure you do. Over the years, I have had probably 2 members really complain that they didn't agree with our endorsement, and then in the last year we had, in the last round of races, I had 3 people say they didn't understand our endorsement of the governor, and all 3 of those, well, I should say all 3 of them. All 3 of those were trial lawyers, which typically don't match up with the chamber's mission, and only 1 of the 3 were actually members of the chamber. The other 2 were former members of the chamber. So I'm sure you do have that situation, but at the end of the day, at the beginning and the end of the day, we represent business, and so we try to select the candidates that we believe are best going to represent business. Now, there's some cases where we say we're not going to make any endorsement, and there's some races where we say we're going to endorse 2 candidates because we think they're both equally qualified, and so we'll do a dual endorsement. That's the exception, not the rule, but you can always take that route if you like.
Okay, and another question about PACs. Do you provide constructive criticism to candidates when they are not behaving in a professional manner? Or do you feel that the old adage, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all? How verbal do you get?
Well, no, we get very involved because we absolutely believe that if we're not involved in that political process, that process is going to get involved in our business and in our investors' business at some point. So, yeah, we're not afraid to speak up, and let people kind of know what we think. But we spend a lot of time on the front end before we make those endorsements, to make sure that we are endorsing those candidates that are, not only pro-business, but are professional. And that's why in some races you'll see us just simply say, hey, we're just not going to get involved in that. We have five municipalities within our parish. I mentioned we're the largest parish in the region, and so we've got 5 small cities within our parish, and there's been a couple cases in some of those small cities in the mayor's races where we've just passed, just because we didn't see the caliber of people that we thought that should be in that race.
Okay. Todd, what is your relationship with the city?
City of New Orleans. So we work. We are, first of all, I'm about from my office in Metairie to the Superdome is 12 miles. So, obviously as New Orleans goes, we go. When you land in New Orleans, you're in Jefferson Parish. That's the airport's in our parish. The New Orleans Saints and the New Orleans Pelicans have their practice facilities just about a mile from my office here in Metairie. So we're very close with the city. There are some issues that we get involved in that they do that we take positions on. In fact, our board is meeting later today, and we'll likely take a position on a property tax that will hire more police officers. And we think that it's important that they're properly funded. So we have a good relationship and a good working relationship. I think that we're a little more suburban. We're a very conservative parish. They're more urban and probably not as conservative. So there's obviously a lot of differences, but we work close with the city when we can.
Okay. What does your Business Resources Division encompass and do?
So that does a couple things. First and foremost, one of our partners is the Goldman Sachs program. We're very honored to be one of 23 cities where Goldman Sachs funds a program called 10,000 Small Businesses. And it's a 8-week program where CEOs of companies between $150,000 and $4 million in revenue, and there's some other criteria, can go through this 8-week course of working on their business instead of in their business. And it's a free program. It's granted by the Goldman Sachs program, but the application process is pretty tedious. So that committee helps identify companies that can go through that program and then kind of holds their hand to help them with the application process to get them into the program. That committee also comes up with speakers and ideas. Again, although it's facilitated by the staff, there's a lot of idea sharing there for our Prosper Jefferson educational programs.
Okay. So this goes to one of your last points about, strong board. How do you address those board members who don't want to take a stand? This member's board is afraid to offend any business, and while they have a government affairs committee, they get frustrated with the board.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I hear that a lot. I go back to being the voice of business, and I think that you have to have some individual conversations. And first of all, if you don't have an executive committee, you ought to have an executive committee, and that really ought to be your kitchen cabinet. That ought to be your key people that are helping to drive the organization before you get to that board level. My executive committee meets 1 week before our board meets, and when we go into the board meeting, there's no surprises, and I've got my key core group on board. And we do have a governmental affairs committee that weighs those issues, but that's a tough one. I think that through the nomination process, it may take you a couple of years, and it took me a couple of years, but you've got to roll some people off and roll some new ones on. You've got to go out and recruit some board members that share that same notion that, if we're going to be, and again, if that's your relevancy, if we're going to be relevant, we can't afraid to take positions and be afraid to offend people. You're the voice of business, and there's already a voice of politicians out there, and there's already a voice of unionized labor out there. You are the voice of business. So I think just, selling that message within your board and making sure you take the time in that nominating process to get the right people on there is paramount.
Todd, how do you determine who sits on the executive committee?
our executive committee is made up of our chairman and our committee chairs. And then the chairman selects 2 at-large members, which not by bylaws but by unofficial rule is typically 2 of our past chairs. So we've got input from the government affairs person, the education committee, the business resource committee. All those committee people are sitting on that. And again, as the CEO of the company and CEO of your chamber, you should have a lot of input in that nominating process to make sure you've got the right people on those committees that can help you, really implement change and drive this ship.
Okay, back to the PACs and your candidate endorsements. Are they bipartisan? Are they consistently Republican, or how?
No, they're bipartisan. Yeah, I would say they're bipartisan. Just because of the nature of our parish, most of the candidates that run in this parish run as Republicans. In fact, I can't think of many in the last round of elections that ran that were not Republican. But we certainly, and that was one of the things that I had to clean up in my bylaws. We had somebody on our Political Action Committee board that was also a vice chair of the local Republican Party. And so our new bylaws say that if you hold an office in a political organization, you can't be on our PAC board. We just thought it was a conflict of interest. Doesn't look right for the candidate if he's at the Republican Party endorsement one night and comes to our endorsement the next night, and it's the same people. So we've gone to great lengths to make sure that it's a diverse group. And again, we're trying to make sure we endorse people that most align with our mission, which in our area tends to be more Republican, but we certainly have endorsed Democrats as well.
Okay, and then we have one final question. This person asks, how would you go about building community consensus and proposing a new industry that the community is divided in having due to various challenges, possibly environmental challenges, or have you been in that situation, and do you have any advice to offer?
Well, I've seen that in our area, and particularly in our region, with the oil and gas industry. Just about 2 years ago, there was a big issue over some fracking that was going on the north side of the lake, which is not our parish. It's actually St. Tammany. It's north to us. And, we got involved in that because we thought, okay, 30 or 35% of this state's economy centers around oil and gas. We've got the headquarters of Chevron 30 miles from us, which is on that north side of the lake. How do we turn our back on the oil and gas industry as long as they're acting responsible and staying within the law? So sometimes those decisions are difficult, much like positions you take on your K through 12 education and taxes and no taxes, and all of those things are difficult. But what we have found is that when we do that, we're respected in the community. People might not always agree with us, but they respect that we carry a big stick, both with our Political Action Committee, which is for candidates, and with our chamber that consistently is behind pro-business issues. And so I think it's about being the leader. I think it's about educating your membership. I think it's about holding forums and educating. But I think at the end of the whole discussion, you've got to take a position. You've got to take action.
Okay, well, I think that's all of our questions. Todd, thank you so much for that presentation and all of your ideas, and thank you. You have your contact information up here. Folks, if you have more questions that you would like to ask Todd or just talk with him offline, you can do so using the contact info on your screen. Just a reminder that this webinar was recorded, so I will have that up either tomorrow or Monday, so take a look for that, and it's on our ACCE University page, which you can get to by going to the home page, clicking on Professional Development, and then ACCE University, and you will see all of our webinars and e-courses there. And I did want to mention that a lot of the issues that Todd mentioned today, we actually have other resources on here at ACCE, and we want to help you with those. We have webinars on just within the past 3-4 months on rebranding, strategic planning, elected official scorecards, strengthening your board, YP programs, and more. So please take a look for those things. Well, I'll also have Todd's presentation, his PowerPoint presentation, posted along with the webinar. And then our next webinar will be next Thursday, a week from today on April 14th, also at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And it will be led by the leadership of the Omaha, Nebraska Chamber. It's in our series of Chamber of the Year Award winners, and they will just be discussing their award-winning talent and workforce development programs. So thank you again, Todd, for your presentation, and thanks to everyone for your participation and interest. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Glad to be a part of it.